Good morning. Today I'm going to be discussing my modified Pagani design PD-1661 Glidelock clasp upgrade. As you can see, I have upgraded the flip lock clasp on my PD-1661 to this Glidelock clasp. This Glidelock clasp was supplied by Carly Wet Official Store on AliExpress and the cost of it is €12. So I'll show you the packaging it comes in. It's fully wrapped with protective film, and then the Glidelock comes in this bubble wrap envelope, which does suffice in protecting it in shipping from any damages. And one also gets this small screwdriver for fitting the Glidelock to the oyster bracelet, or alternatively resizing your bracelet. So that's all well and good, but however, unfortunately I cannot recommend it to you. As you'll know from my previous reviews, when reviewing a watch or another item, I have a policy that the item or the watch should meet my criteria of being both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So at €12, I'm not going to recommend it because I don't consider it to be excellent quality, nor do I consider it to be excellent value. Yes, it is an okay clasp, it is acceptable in terms of its execution, it does do the job. But it's not excellent quality, nor is it excellent value, and I'll show you specifically why I say that. If you look at the flip lock, there is a lot of play around the hinge pin between the flip lock and the body of the flip lock mechanism. As you can see, the flip lock wobbles about. Now if I show you the gap on the left hand flank, you can see that the gap opens and closes between the flip lock and the body of the clasp. There's 1mm of play, and on the top side there's only 0.5mm of play, so it's not symmetrical. It's a sloppy fit. And the problem with having that 1mm gap on the left hand flank, which opens and closes, is the flip lock constantly taps against the body of the Glidelock clasp. So when wearing this Glidelock clasp on the wrist, you get this annoying tapping sound. It's a rattling noise and it's constant. So it's a poorly executed clasp in terms of its build quality and its quality control. I'll show you another area of disappointment. If you look at the hinge pin, which hinges between the internal and also the body of the flip lock mechanism, there's a lot of play around the hinge pin. Now this is a 1mm pin made from 316L grade stainless steel, and it's inevitable what will happen with the body of the flip lock. The hole in it, which is drilled through it, will eventually elongate, and that will accelerate the wear on the hinge pin, which is constantly in shear. And eventually what happens is it will wear down and become weakened and then shear. And that means the flip lock will then fail and the watch will fall off your wrist. So my concern would be the longevity in terms of how durable is that wobbly pin going to be fitted through the sloppy fit of hole in the body of the flip lock. It's a poor fit and it's poorly executed, and this is brand new. So in a short length of time it will eventually wear out and shear. Now, with regards to the execution of the Glidelock, yes, it's not as smooth as Rolex as one would expect. This is a €12 Chinese-made Glidelock. It's not made by Rolex in Switzerland, so that's absolutely fair enough. But however, it's disappointing with regards to the quality of the finishing. The Glidelock mechanism works okay, but I'm just going to zoom in, and then I'm going to point out specifically the area that I'm disappointed with. Now, if you focus on the toothpick, this area here, the internal parts of the flip lock, which joins the flip lock mechanism to the Glidelock here, this is unfinished. I'll explain how they make it. It's made from solid 316L grade stainless steel, as one would expect, and it's die cast metal. So what the factory does is they heat up molten stainless steel and they melt the molten stainless steel into a die, and then they cast it. And the molten metal cools down, and what you have here is a die cast piece of metal. Now after the die casting process, after the 316L grade stainless steel casting has cooled down, it's supposed to be machined to deburr it, remove any flashings, and the other thing they do is they polish it on a buffing wheel to improve the quality of the finishing. And as you can see, this one has been die cast, but it hasn't been finished whatsoever. There's no deburring, and also there is no buffing to it. It's not a brushed satin finish. This is exactly how cast stainless steel looks like when it's removed from a die, with no finishing whatsoever. And it's a clear cost-cutting measure that Carly Wet have done in their factory. They have unfinished the cast section of this because they think that, well, it's on the inside, no one's going to look at it closely, but unfortunately I scrutinise things and I'm going to show it to you. So I can't recommend it. Very disappointing finishing. Now I'm just going to contrast it with my Blyger PA21 clasp. Just bear with me, I'll get the camera to focus on it. So this is the signed Blyger Glidelock clasp, which came on my PA21 Explorer that you've seen. I've previously reviewed it. As you can see, it's signed. Now I'll just show you the internals of this Glidelock in comparison, and you'll see the difference in finishing. Now if I point at it with a toothpick, this is the area that we're looking at here. As you can see, this has been die cast, but they have deburred it and they've also polished it on a buffing wheel. As you can see, the finish is better, it's shiny. So this has clearly had some hand finishing using a buffing wheel machine, and as you can see, the quality of the die casting is better. Now bear in mind, this is on a watch that costs €65, and the quality of the Glidelock is superior to the €12 Glidelock clasp from Carly Wet. So it is possible to deburr it and also to finish it on a buffing wheel with minimal production expense, and this is on a very inexpensive Glidelock clasp on my Blyger PA21. And I'll just lastly contrast it to my Pagani design. This is the latest version of PD-1661 Hulk. As you can see, this is a 2021 version. So this is the very latest standard of the Pagani design factory, and I'll show you the internals of the flip lock. Now this doesn't have a Glidelock mechanism, as you know, but I've zoomed in and you'll see the difference in finishing. As you can see, this is finished to a higher standard. This area here, which is die cast stainless steel, as you can see, they have deburred the flashings on it, and they have also buffed it on a buffing wheel, and as you can see, it's polished. It's a satin finish, it's not mirror polished and it's not perfect, but however, it's finished to what I consider to be a satisfactory standard, and certainly a higher quality of finishing than on the Carly Wet one, which is unfinished. It's just simply removed from the die and fitted into the body of the Glidelock without any finishing. So I would say the quality of the Pagani design flip-lock finishing is better, and I would also say the Blyger PA21 Glidelock finishing is better than the Carly Wet, respectively. So I would say that the Pagani design one is satisfactory, and the Blyger PA21 is satisfactory. Right, so I'll just talk about the dimensions so you'll understand the difference between the two. Just bear with me and I'll close the Pagani design one. Right, so side to side, exactly the same thickness, exactly the same width, but if you look at the Carly Wet Glidelock on the left compared to the PD-1661 Pagani design flip lock on the right, you can see that it's longer. So in order to get the same fit between the Glidelock and the Pagani design clasp, you'll need to remove one full link from the Oyster bracelet. With regards to compatibility, as you can see, they're interchangeable, which is good. This Glidelock will fit a Pagani design PD-1661 Oyster style bracelet, and it will also fit the Pagani design PD-1662 Jubilee style bracelet fitted to the Pepsi GMT Master 2 homage. So good compatibility, exactly the same dimensions. The only difference in dimension is the length, but the width and the thickness are absolutely identical. Now with regards to the mechanism in terms of its execution, it's not silky smooth as I've discussed. One isn't going to get as smooth as Rolex, which is fair enough. But however, I actually prefer the quality in terms of the build quality of the Pagani design flip-lock clasp. With regards to the hinge pin, there's less play, it feels tighter, which is better. And also with regards to the pin on the flip-lock of the Pagani design clasp, again, less play, it feels tighter. And just with regards to the fit of the flip-lock to the body of the flip-lock, as you can see, we don't have that 1mm gap on the left-hand flank or the right-hand flank. It's tighter. So one doesn't get that annoying rattle, the tapping of metal between the flip-lock and the body of the clasp itself. Overall, I would describe the Pagani design flip-lock to be better made. Now with regards to the Blyger, I'll just talk you through the fit of that, just to give you a reference point. As you can see, the quality of the finishing on the Blyger is better. Brushed satin finish is superior to the Carly Wet, mirror polishing is superior, and again, we don't have that 1mm gap on the left-hand flank, nor do we have it on the right-hand flank. It's a tight fit between the Glidelock and the body of the Glidelock itself. And again, the fit of the flip lock on the body is better, and I would also say the hinge pin is a tighter fit also with less play. It's not as good as the Pagani design, there is a slight bit of play there, but it's nothing like as bad as on the Glidelock. The Glidelock mechanism is very similar in terms of its smoothness of operation. It does click in out satisfactorily. Quality of the finishing is better, but in terms of its performance, no, it's not as good as a Rolex Glidelock, but one has to be realistic. But compared to the Glidelock Glidelock, unfortunately I would say that the disappointment of the finishing really does let the clasp down. It does click in and out okay, one can slide it up and down the Glidelock, and it does click in and out securely, so in terms of its operation, yes, it is okay. But however, if you compare the finishing, just look at the brushed satin finish to the body of the exterior. You can see a lot of machine marks from when it's milled. As you can see, it hasn't been buffed to a satisfactory standard. It's poor quality. It's clearly a cost-cutting measure. Now I'll just compare it to the Pagani design. As you can see, the brushed satin finish on the Pagani design, the 316L grade stainless steel grains, are brushed longitudinally to a higher standard. As you can see, it's more like a Rolex. It has that nice luster and sheen. So better quality finishing on the Pagani design. And lastly, I'll just compare it to the Bliger. Now again on the Bliger, better luster, one can see the grains of the 316L grade stainless steel, nice sheen to it, and also the grains of the metal have been brushed longitudinally, so one gets that characteristic luster of 316L grade stainless steel. Better looking, I would describe the Bliger PA21 Glidelock to be good quality, and of course the Pagani design PD-1661 flip lock to be excellent quality. This is the best finishing of all. So really it's disappointing, and I'll just lastly show you side by side the Glidelock Glidelock compared to the Pagani design in terms of the brushed satin finish, and you'll be able to see the difference in quality. So on the right we have the PD-1661 clasp, and on the left we have the Glidelock Glidelock. So I'll just show you sideways, and then you'll be able to see the difference in quality excuse me, of the machining. So as you can see, looking at the top clasp, the PD-1661, we don't have any machining marks, no milling marks, no tool marks. But if you look at the bottom, you can see the tool marks longitudinally where it was machined from a cast piece of metal. So the quality of the luster and the sheen of the 316L grade grains of metal are better on the Pagani design. If I just tilt it in the light there, if you look at the sheen and the luster, you can see that they're both made out of the same material, 316L grade stainless steel. But on the Pagani design, the quality of the finishing is better. It's not as good as Rolex, but Rolex Glidelock clasps are made from 9040L oyster steel, which has a different sheen and luster, and one has to expect that one is never going to get the same luster from 316L as 9040L oyster steel. They're slightly different. But however, just in terms of finishing, one can clearly see the disappointment of the Glidelock Glidelock. So lastly, I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I've removed one link from the bracelet to get the correct fit, and as you'll know from my previous reviews, I size my bracelets loose to the correct standard, which is fitting an index finger underneath the Glidelock at all times. That allows for wrist expansion when in warm weather, or alternatively when one is active. So as you can see, the modified PD-1661 is very aesthetically pleasing. I'm absolutely delighted with my modifications, removing the Cyclops magnifier from the flat sapphire crystal and fitting the ceramic mill sub bezel insert does finish the piece to perfection. I'm just waiting on a set of mill sub sword hands to come from Yaboki's in Hong Kong, and that will finish this piece off. So the 20mm down to 16mm taper is perfect. But however, it's just disappointing with regards to the finishing of the Glidelock Glidelock. As you can see, those longitudinal machine marks from the milling, they're just very eye-catching. One can see them in the light, as you can see. In terms of comfort, yes, it is comfortable. It does sit flat on the wrist, the same as a Rolex Glidelock clasp, or alternatively the Pagani design flip-lock clasp. So it does do the job. It is comfortable. There's no sharp edges on the corners, and the chamfers are done to a satisfactory standard. There's no sharp razor edges, so it is finished with regards to deburring to an acceptable standard. Yes, it does look aesthetically pleasing because it is like a Rolex Glidelock clasp, but I actually think the Pagani design PD-1661 clasp is actually better in terms of its finishing overall. Now, with regards to the Blyger PA21 Explorer clasp, I would actually say that this is better, and I have actually fitted this to my Pagani design just to test it out, and the comfort is better. It just feels better on the wrist because the quality of the finishing is superior, it looks better, and also the quality of the deburring with regards to the points are just better done. It's not as good as the Pagani design clasp overall, but however the Glidelock mechanism is more satisfactory because the internals have been finished to a higher standard, as I've discussed. With regards to the interior, it's really very similar to a Pagani design. The brushed satin finish to the centre section and the mirror polishing is done to the same standard. So I would just say that the main disappointment of the Glidelock is the internals with regards to that cast metal section that I've showed you with the toothpick. So that's something to consider. So yes, it is an upgrade to fit a Glidelock to a Pagani design. But however, it's just a shame that there isn't one available on AliExpress which is closer to Rolex quality. I would happily pay more than €12. I would happily pay 20 or 25 euro to get a better quality Glidelock. And as you can see, I have fitted the Pagani design clasp onto my Blyger Explorer because I'm going to be modifying this with a PD-1661 dial hands and movements to make it a Pagani design Explorer homage. So really looking forward to finishing this one off. But overall, I think that this is better looking. There's a nicer luster to the Pagani design flip lock, and that's why I've actually exchanged the Pagani design flip lock for the Blyger Glidelock. The other thing is it fits slightly flatter on the wrist because it doesn't have a Glidelock mechanism. And the thing about that is it means that it's slightly lower profile even though they're the same thickness. And I'll just show you what I mean. When the clasp is closed, the internal section of the mechanism sits closer to the body. As you can see, there's no gap there. If you look, it actually wraps around the wrist very well due to the curved profile, but also there's no gap between the internal mechanism and the exterior of the body of the flip lock. It's a tighter fit, but I'll apply this criticism to the Blyger. There's a gap. If you look at between the internal mechanism and also the body of the flip lock itself, the Glidelock, sorry, you can see there's a gap. And when on the wrist, that gap still persists. There's a gap underneath the bracelet of approximately 2 millimeters, as you can see there when I squeeze it. It feels like it's sprung loaded. And regardless of whether the end link is on the maximum extension of the Glidelock or the minimum extension, that gap persists. And again, that creates a rattling noise because what happens is the internal mechanism taps against the exterior and it makes this annoying tapping sound when worn on the wrist. So I'll apply that criticism to this Blyger PA21 Glidelock and also to the Glidelock. As you can see, it has the same gap. Now this is on the maximum extension, so therefore the gap is reduced, but when one moves the end link in on the Glidelock, it makes the gap bigger like this, as you can see, and what happens then is it taps like that. So overall, these are things you need to consider if you're going to upgrade your Pagani design flip lock to a Glidelock such as this Glidelock one. You're going to get a tapping noise from the gap between the flip lock and the body, and you're also going to get a tapping noise from the internal mechanism tapping against the end link like that. So that's something to consider. Now I have to be honest with you and say overall I'm dissatisfied with it, and I'm going to be changing it back from the Glidelock to the Pagani design flip lock. The shortcomings are just something I'm not going to live with, and also I don't like the rattling noises. I actually prefer the tighter fit of the Pagani design PD-1661 clasp as fitted to this latest version of Hulk. Now in my next video I'm going to be doing a full review of this Hulk. So I hope you've enjoyed my discussion of the Glidelock Glidelock clasp. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.